Can you help people understand why you fabricated so many issues of your life?
A lot of the things you said are perpetrated by the media.
Just 10 minutes prior to the Miami mayor speaking, I count maybe a dozen, 2 dozen people here. You can see them a bit in the background who are ready to see the Miami mayor speak. And it's a reflection really of where he's at in the polls right now. In mere hours, the first batch of results for the New Hampshire primary are going to come in, a lot of them right here in Manchester. Elections across Suffolk County take place on November 7th. Many keeping an eye on this county executive election that could turn very competitive as Supervisor Romaine takes on newcomer Democrat David Colon. For the first time in over 25 years, Long Island's congressional delegation is composed entirely of Republicans. One may assume they would all get together, but that could not be further from the truth. On May 31st, you tweeted that the debt ceiling deal, quote, sells out the American people and the planet on which we live. Now, President Biden has hailed the deal as an example of compromise. Why were you against the legislation?
This should not have even gotten to the point where it got.
One county I really do want to focus on in particular, and this one's really interesting, is Erie County. Right in the corner of the state. You see this little circle I'm making right now? That's where Erie County is in. Mehmet Oz currently is leading there. There's only 2% of the vote in. But Erie County is fascinating because it sided with President Biden in 2020. But in 2016, it did go with former President Trump by just a little bit. This is a county that was affected by deindustrialization in the 1980s. And those voters over time have sided towards the GOP. Again, this is the Rust Belt area. These areas in particular, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and even Wisconsin, really starts to get conservative over time. That county in particular, Erie, could serve as a bellwether, not just for Pennsylvania, but also the Senate as a whole and the balance of power in Washington.
Good to be here, guys.
Vivek Ramaswamy laid out his vision for America in front of hundreds of voters in Rye, New Hampshire, Sunday afternoon.
We are starved for purpose and meaning.
The GOP presidential hopeful, who has been rising in the polls, discussed restoring a national identity, increasing fossil fuel production, and removing agencies such as the Department of Education and the FBI. Vivek told WRHU what his first action as president would be. What would be the first thing you would do if elected president?
Shut down the administrative state, shut down the agencies, rescind the unconstitutional federal regulations. And there are many of them, and I will start on day one.
Voters weighed in on what the political newcomer said.
I thought his ideologies were right on, about capitalism, about bringing change for tomorrow.
He talks about how he would have made different judgments than Donald Trump on certain cases. I think he should go specifically on what judgments he wouldn't have done.
Vivek wants to raise the voting age to 25 unless citizens fulfill a national service requirement. The millionaire entrepreneur believes his civic duty voting policy will not disadvantage Democrats, despite their significant support among young voters.
I would say that it is provides national pride amongst all voters. Young voting rates will skyrocket.
The event was organized by former U.S. Ambassador Scott Brown and his wife Gail. Although he served under the Trump administration, Brown is not ready to make an endorsement in the race.
At the end, I'll make a determination who I'm going to endorse. But I want people who are going to be better, obviously, than the Biden administration.
Vivek will have the chance to sway more voters at next week's Republican presidential debate. For WRHU News, I'm Michael Richardson. Farmers have cultivated New Hampshire's land for centuries. Today, over 4,000 farms operate in this mostly white, college-educated, fiscally conservative New England state. Farmers here are known for producing milk and apples, but each of the 3 farms I visited were unique. That may help explain how locals in the agriculture industry felt about the upcoming presidential primary.
So everything we grow is certified organic.
It was a brisk 20 degrees with a couple of inches of snow on the ground when I met James Stever at his home. He and his wife Marley co-own Generation Farm, which lies fewer than 10 miles from the state capital. While walking on the farm, I did catch a remnant of the warmer temperatures.
That's a zombie lettuce. So that was lettuce.
Last year, the National Weather Service recorded nearly 56 inches of rain in Manchester, an increase of roughly 50% from 2022. The sheer amount of rain hurt farmers, including James, who reduced his financial safety net. This is on top of rising costs that many Americans have signaled are an important issue in the 2024 contest.
Pretty much the cost of every single input that goes into farming or food production has gone up, during this period, starting with the trade wars, accelerating during the pandemic, and then getting even worse after the pandemic with inflation.
This is the first of many.
The trade war James mentioned has gone on since 2018, when the United States began imposing tariffs on Chinese products. China, along with 5 other trading partners, countered with retaliatory tariffs on various American agricultural goods. Generation Farms still feels the impact of those tariffs, with increased prices on manufacturing components such as recycled clamshells.
You can be doing better in terms of revenue than you've ever been doing, but in the end of the day, you will be making less money.
As for who James plans to vote for on Tuesday,
I'm likely going to vote for Joe Biden. Joe Biden was dealt a difficult hand, and he's played his cards pretty well.
the glistening blue waters of Lake Winnipesaukee were frozen over when I visited Beans and Greens Farm in nearby Guilford. Chris Coleus purchased the farm stand in 2021 after trying his hand at the distribution industry in Massachusetts.
One of the reasons I bought this is I wanted to make sure that it would be pandemic resistant.
The farm's beer garden, corn maze, and wildflower growing areas are closed for the winter, unlike the stand. Built in the 18th century, the shop was bursting with sizzling chili, soups, pastas, cookies, and locally sourced produce. With an election that has drawn a lot of attention to national issues, Chris hopes the next president thinks locally.
You look in your town, you look in your state, and you look in your country before you buy goods from other parts of the world. And I think having a leader that can really unite us and have people think about that, we'll all be better off.
Lowering costs represents just one issue Chris wants to see addressed in Washington.
I think inflation, I think tackling the federal deficit is really important, and I think having a plan for our seniors.
Just outside of Portsmouth lies Newfields, a small town that Governor Chris Sununu and Senator Maggie Hassan call home, and where I went to visit Vernon Family Farm. Upon entering the 33-acre property, I was immediately greeted by Yeti, the family's 2-year-old Bernese mountain dog. He was not the only one seemingly intrigued by my arrival. All these sheep back here, if you look at them, they're all looking straight at me. It is a little creepy. I feel like I'm being watched. Jeremiah Vernon co-owns the farm alongside his wife Nicole, who is a local high school Spanish teacher. Jeremiah hopes the upcoming election marks a shift toward relaxing government regulations.
I think code and code enforcement has gone completely out of control.
A recent Politico analysis found that net farm income has grown by over $70 billion under Biden. The Department of Agriculture has also announced various programs aimed at helping small farmers, including a $1 billion investment to bolster processing capacities. These initiatives have not helped the Vernons, who sell many products on single-digit margins.
Our farm is not in a good place economically. Nothing that has come through the government has improved our situation.
As the primary approaches, Jeremiah may not head to the polls altogether.
This is the first year in my entire life that I've thought about not voting. It's already Trump versus Biden. It doesn't matter what I do.
He has considered voting for Ambassador Nikki Haley in the general election if she were to face Biden. But if she is not the Republican nominee, Jeremiah says he may lean toward a third-party candidate, as he is not a fan of either major frontrunner.
I think Trump is the worst thing that's happened to us as a president ever. I also think that Biden is not far behind.
3 farms, each owner with a unique perspective as to who should lead America into the future and what the next president should do to elevate cultivators. They represent a small fraction of farmers in the Granite State, but tell a story about how the people who feed America are feeling heading into the first presidential primary. For WRHU News, I'm Michael Richardson.